And who's just the picture of the bridge here? Who's that? Is that the person?
Yeah.
Marvin.
Oh, hi. Okay. Okay.
Are you on the bridge? Is that what's happening, or?
Okay, so I guess we're going to do call to order, and then we'll do the roll call. Jessica, do you want to do that?
Oh, you have to call it to order, and then I do the roll call.
Okay, I'm calling it to order, calling this meeting to order on April 13th at 6:07.
All right, roll call. Commissioner Warwick.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Kiesling.
Here.
And Councilor Bescheid will not be joining us tonight. But you're all here, so we have a quorum.
Great. All right. Do you want to, so you've already done roll calls. We'll do Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
Okay. I pledge of allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Still, really, it never gets old.
And I see you giggling before we even start.
It's better or worse, I don't know.
All right, so we have two things going on tonight. We have a site plan review, and we have we have a review of a request for construction of a fence, and then we've got the continuation of a review for consideration of the request for asking for city vacate of right of way. We're going to start off with the review to consider a request for construction of a 5-foot fence along the northern and southern edge of tax lot 401, along with a gate on the Kellogg Street frontage. The address there is 1156 7th Avenue. Owner and applicant Jason and Rosalie Wells. Are there any objections to the justification of the commission to hear this matter? Does any commissioner wish to make any disclosure or abstain from participating or voting on this matter because of the possible financial gain resulting from this application, because you own property within the area entitled to receive notice of this hearing, or because you have a direct private interest in the proposal, or because you have determined that you cannot be impartial?
No.
Okay. Does any commissioner need to declare or prior contact with the applicant or any party involved in this hearing? If so, please state with whom you had contact with, what was said. If any commissioner declares an ex parte communication state, the parties will have the right to rebut the substance of this communication during their testimony at the hearing. Does anybody have anything that they want to say, the commissioners? Okay. Has any commissioner viewed the property, and do you have any evidence gained from that visit that you want to share, that you want to state for the record? Okay, we're going to go ahead and go to the staff report. Ryan, will you give us that?
Okay, for the record, I'm Ryan Nolan, contract planner from Rogue Valley Council of Governments. And the first review we're looking at is a request for a fence permit. As the chair stated, so the owner of the properties and the applicant are Jason and Rosalie Wells. They own tax lot 400 and tax lot 401 at 1156 7th Avenue. The property has frontage on 7th Avenue, which is fairly not really developed at this location, but for access, they really use the narrow strip, which is tax lot 401, to access their property, which is tax lot 400. So I'll kind of go through what criteria defenses need to meet, and then some discussion about as presented in the staff report. One note, the original staff report that you have was a draft, and it does mention a partition request. This is clearly a fence permit that was just copied. So our fence criteria are found in section 17.56.010, and that was included in the packet. It deals with the height, it requires clear vision areas at driveways, etc. So there are a couple of things that we need to look at. So I'll just kind of quickly read through the one page of the staff report. So fences are allowed to be constructed on side and rear property lawns as long as they are not fronting a street, provided they do not exceed 6 feet in height. So in essence, in your front yard, you can't build a 6-foot tall fence right on the street edge. However, front yards, which is an area based on zoning designation and measured from the front property line back towards the house, may only have fences up to 3.5 feet tall. For the R1 zone, which is what this property is in, considered to be the area fronting the street for a distance of 20 feet back towards the house. So that 20-foot strip of property, in this case on 7th and on, what's the other street frontage is Kellogg Street. The first 20 feet of those properties is considered the front yard. As I said, tax lot 401 is really a very small, narrow strip of land which serves as a driveway for tax lot 400. Parcel also has easements for city water and sewer, which are related to operation and maintenance. And there is a recorded easement for the city from 1974 covering that utility easement. The proposed fencing along the north side and south edge of tax lot 401, kind of both sides of that long, narrow strip, appears to conform with the city's fence standards, as the fence that's proposed would be 5 feet high, which is less than the 6-foot maximum height. It's unclear if the property lines have actually been located, and it appears by looking at aerial images that the home at 638 Kellogg Street is probably built over the tax lot line, so it might be difficult to estimate without a lot of work by the property owner to determine that they're really building it on their property line. That's important. So it also appears that 1140 North 7th Street takes access off of that driveway, tax lot 401, as well as 706 Kellogg Street. So it looks like not only the property at 400, tax lot 400, but 2 of their neighbors appear to use that driveway for their access also. And the request from the property owner is to fence off that entire driveway area. So while the fencing along the north and south edges of the lot may be approvable per the code of Gold Hill, the applicant needs to determine where the property lines are before they place the fence. And the city easement recorded in 1974 provides a 10-foot access easement associated with the public water and sewer line in the driveway. So in accordance with that easement, any gate that's proposed should align with the water and sewer access easement and shall be at least 10 feet wide so that the City of Gold Hill Public Works can have unfettered access to enter that gate as needed if approved. So the recommendation from staff is admission that the proposed fence is problematic. However, the following conditions may make this an approvable proposed fence. So staff recommends, if Planning Commission is in favor of approving the fence, that there be 4 conditions attached. 1, the property owner shall locate all property lines of tax lot 401 prior to constructing fence. 2, the property owner shall utilize the 811 call before you dig service to locate all utility lines before constructing the fence. 3, if there are any access issues or disagreements which arise with neighboring property owners, it should be clear that discrepancies are civil issues to be resolved between property owners and are not managed or controlled or resolved through any city authority. 4, any proposed fencing shall meet all requirements of section 17.56.010 of the City of Gold Hill Municipal Code. Specifically A, the fence along the property line along Kellogg Street shall be set back 20 feet from the property line, or it should be no taller than 3.5 feet. And B, any proposed gate shall be accessible to the city at all times and shall be at least 10 feet wide and be located in the easement reserved for city sewer and water line access. So that's a brief review of the staff report. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to address those.
One thing I was looking at, the tax lot map says that that 401 tax lot is only 10 feet wide. So it's going to be hard to put, in my mind, to put a 10-foot gate when the lot is only 10 feet wide, assuming you're going to have a post on either side. If the open space between the posts has to be 10 feet, there's no, in my mind, there isn't a way you can put a 10-foot gate on a 10-foot lot.
That's a pretty smart deduction. I hadn't even realized that, but
Well,
that's exactly true.
well, the map in your staff report, I looked, you can't quite see the 10 feet, but if you go to the county tax lot on the front counter, it's definite. It's only a 10-foot wide lot. So to me, that creates a problem.
Mhm. I think that's a very good point.
And then I guess the other question I had was, I'm assuming that if they're going to fence both, assuming they could fence both sides of that driveway, the fence, I'm assuming the fence is going to start to the west of the driveway for the other two existing homes that are there. Because, or is that, where exactly is the gate going to go, I guess is my question.
He would want to put the gate at the end, like where the
Kellogg
access to
Street.
Kellogg is, to make it his own private driveway.
Well, then the gate, it seems to me that the gate is going to be also limiting access to the other two homes.
Yes.
Tax
And
lot.
that's kind of why he wants the fence, because it's his driveway. They have access to their homes from 7th Avenue, but they've been using his easement to get into their
Oh,
houses.
I see. So he wants to fence it off.
Well,
and
not his easement, his property.
And he wants to block those driveways then, as
Yes.
they're currently being used. Okay. Which I guess would be within his rights if he can meet the conditions.
Correct.
And that's where we are.
Okay, okay.
And there is access for them to be able to get to their properties on another street, so that makes good sense. But that was my question, so, yeah.
Yes. There is access from 7th Avenue to both of those houses.
Commissioner Warwick's question is technically correct. The city's easement provides that they have a 10-foot unobstructed access easement that they can cross that water sewer line with. That is the full width of that tax lot. So if you build a fence on it, even if it's a 6-inch or 4-inch post, that access easement is actually less than 10 feet wide at that point. So that's a good point that I hadn't considered.
I mean, I know that's technically the rule, but we always walk up that hill. I mean, I don't need 10 feet to walk up a hill. But it is the code that it says 10 feet, but we don't drive up that hill. We've never driven up that hill to read those meters. We park at the base there because all of the meters at the top of Kellogg, they're all spread out right there. So we park the top of the truck at the top of Kellogg and then walk to all the various houses. We've never driven up that because then we'd have to back all the way down. It's kind of a driveway. So, but the rule does say 10 feet, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to follow the restrictions.
Because that's just us reading meters. Suppose there's a sewer line and RVSS needs to get up there. They need big access.
They need that width to be able to get their vehicles up there. Yeah, it's a bit of a, I think the first thing is and I agree, it looks like the one house, if you look at the tax lot maps, it looks like the one house sits over the property line. So I don't know, may have to firmly identify exactly where the property lines are.
Are you talking about tax lot 402?
Let's
301.
301?
Yeah, the house just to the south of the driveway.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, does he actually want a gate or did he just want to fence it? I don't know what his app said.
It doesn't request a gate. I would like to fence both sides of tax lot 401 and gate the entrance.
Gate the entrance, yeah.
Doesn't sound like he can gate the entrance.
Not
Well,
with, at least not with a 10-foot wide gate.
I guess he could apply for a variance.
I mean, and actually, even if you put in a fence, it's on your property. You don't leave a 10-foot wide access. You leave, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet. So
If there's a 10-foot access easement, doesn't that mean that the easement is the whole thing?
I mean,
So generally, if it's an unobstructable access easement, that means you can't build into it. So
Right.
you can't build 6 inches, you can't build 1 foot. I
Right.
mean, that's really up to the city to determine, do they need the 10-foot access easement, but that's legally what they have approval for.
So he actually doesn't, essentially, that 10-foot piece of property he thinks he owns, he probably doesn't. I mean, effectively, because it's got a
No, so he just bought the house and he bought both lots together. It's his lot that he bought.
He owns it. He just has an easement on it.
Yeah.
he owns it, but he has an easement on it that precludes him building a fence or a gate.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd almost have to agree, because if it has to be 10-foot wide unobstructed, that means the distance between the fences would have to be 10 feet in my mind, which means you're going to be over the property line on either side with your fence posts.
And I rarely see utility access easements less than 10 feet in width.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common width, and I think that's
And it's the
understanding
purpose of the 10 feet is so you can get a vehicle up there.
I think it's really so that you could get like a excavator in if you need to replace a line. If it's less than 10 feet, it can become challenging to actually replace a line, because you have to be able to maneuver excavation equipment.
Or if you had to get a sewer flusher truck up there to flush the line out, that type of thing, you would definitely need that 10 feet.
If they went with a pole instead of a post, I mean, that might be easier, right? I mean, it still would maybe be an inch coming in, but not 8 inches out of the.
Well, if our easement covers the whole thing, then I don't think he can build anything on it.
I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, that.
If the property was 10 feet, 12 feet wide, then he could put a 10-foot fence on there and be on his property, and it would satisfy the conditions of the easement. But that's not the case. It's kind of a tough situation.
It's definitely 10 feet wide.
So the suggestion for the planning commission would be to recommend approval or recommend denial, and then find a specific reason if denial is the choice. And I think in this case that would be due to the existing access easement of the city, which is document number 7403685. The city has an unencumbered access to 10 feet, which would be the entire parcel.
So is the applicant in here or wanting to be?
No, he's not here.
Okay. So so does anybody have a motion, or does anybody have any more questions for staff before we go to a motion?
Yes, I'd move to decline it just because it doesn't work.
I think that the motion needs to be a little bit more specific. Can you give me a little bit more specific so that I can see what?
I mean, I move that we decline the application to build a fence and a gate.
Due to the existing easement by the
Due to the
city?
existing easement that seems to make it impossible.
So do we have a second or any?
I'll second.
Okay, and so can you just reiterate that one more time, what we're saying we're doing?
Basically, we're declining the application because the city easement makes precludes having or a fence.
Sorry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? There aren't any? Okay.
It's probably not the outcome they were hoping for, but I don't see that we have any choice.
Well, if they come back with a different idea, maybe, there's something they could come up with. Okay.
I'll draft a decision letter and send that to you tomorrow, Jessica.
Okay, thank you.
So continuation of review to consider a request asking for the city to vacate right-of-way adjacent to 28 Dardanelle Street, owner and applicant James Newstead.
And I believe, yeah, Amy might be here too.
Okay. Oh, his audio is not on yet.
If they're both there, yes.
Chair Brown, if I might make a comment.
Sure.
I would just kind of to frame the discussion, I think the role for the Planning Commission should be to hear their request and consider a recommendation to the City Council. Ultimately, the City Council would have to be the decision-making body if the choice were to vacate any public right-of-way. So it would be considering a potential recommendation to the City Council. So you could choose to make a recommendation or you could choose to take no action. That would be the choice of the Planning Commission.
So we will be hearing to choose to make a recommendation or choose to not make a recommendation and allow it to go to council without a recommendation. So I believe that we got a PowerPoint presentation about an hour ago, half hour ago. So commissioners, can you let me know if you've gotten?
Yeah, I received mine.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Do you have?
Well, we'll see it, so.
Oh, are you guys going to share that? You'll be.
Well, I mean, when the applicant has their opportunity to speak, I'm sure they will share their
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if we were going to need to see that. Okay. Want to start off with, does any commissioners wish to make any disclosure or abstain from participating or voting on this matter because of a possible financial gain resulting from this application, because you own property within the area entitled to receive notice of this hearing, or because you have a direct private interest in the proposal, or because you have determined that you are not impartial? Does any commissioner need to declare a prior contact with the applicant or any party involved in this hearing? If so, please state with whom you had contact with, what was said and what was said. If any counselor declares an ex parte communication, commissioner declares an ex parte communication state, the parties will have to have the right to review the substance of this communication during their testimony at this hearing. Does any commissioner want to declare any prior contact with the applicant?
I walked down to I walked over to the property, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and just to see what was going on. And I talked to somebody who I think worked there. Actually, I didn't. What happened was I walked onto I was on the city property, and somebody asked me if they could help me. And I said no. And they were more insistent about whether they could help me or not. And I said, I was with the planning commission and I was just looking at the property. And anyway, I think the person was an employee maybe of the owners, but was very territorial for what was city property. And I was offended.
So I want to declare that I've had contact with the applicant. I actually walked the property, listened to his interest in what could be done based off of the last time he met with the commission. And so any information I took away from that seems that if the property were going to be used by the city to create a street, there seems to be, and I'm not saying I looked this up or validated it, but seems to be that there would be some width issues that would be incumbent or cross over other people's properties on Dardanelle, which is something that I'd like to maybe talk to Ryan a little bit more about if it's not brought up this evening, to find out what that width of a future street would need to be in order for us to be able to actually use that as a access. And then would that be, if we were to create a street, would that be taking also property away from the other properties on Dardanelle in that area besides this one? So I thought that was an interesting point. And so anyways, I just walked the property and looked at some things and listened to what he had to say. So I can't say that I found out anything else that we hadn't already discussed last time, other than viewing what might be possibly an access point to the river. Because we talked about some different ideas, that maybe parts of that could be left still for, somebody to walk down there and look at the river or have an access to the river. But that was it. Do you want to say anything, Mark? Is there anything, have you been down there?
No, I haven't. I've just driven by just from around the corner was all. I haven't walked the property or anything.
Okay. I don't think we have a staff report or anything, Ryan. That's not what this is about, right? So we're just going to turn it over to the applicant to hear what they have to say. Okay. So James, do you want to go by Jim or James? Do you have a preference?
No, either one is fine. We could go by James. James is good.
Okay. James, do you want to, you have some time to represent, your case, your issue to present for the next 15 minutes if you'd like?
Yeah, I was hoping Amy could come in here. Hi, Amy. I was hoping Amy could come in and present the PowerPoint presentation that she's put together for you.
Give me just a minute to set up the screen share. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Can you see 28 Dardanelles?
Yeah,
I
there we
should
go.
add.
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me figure out how I can look at both things. Okay. Well, good evening, commissioners. My name is Amy Gunter, and I own Rogue Planning and Development Services. And I have been, I'm here this evening with Mr. James Newstead, the property owner of 28 Dardanelle Street. It consists of lots 11 and lot 12, block 31 of the original town of Gold Hill. Mr. Newstead requested that I approach the city of Gold Hill to discuss the potential vacation of an 80-foot wide right-of-way for Dardanelle's Street along the frontage of his property. The portion of the frontage is not improved past the intersection of Riverside Avenue, which is sort of cut off here, but it's the second, or it's the one closest to the end of where the word Dardanelles is on this screen. Mr. Newstead's lot is the 0.29 acre property, tax lot 7,500. that is at the end of where Dardanelles terminates, and the Rogue River is to the south of his property. The Dardanelles right of way from this is like a Google Street View driving past on Riverside Avenue. And so you can see sort of the width of the right of way in this picture. The white picket fence approximately to roughly the large, looks like a cedar tree just on the other side of this pickup truck. That's on the left-hand side of the screen. That's approximately the right of way width. Essentially, Dardanelles is improved like a narrow driveway, providing access to Mr. Newstead's home. This is a view further down of Dardanelles just the other day of what it looks like as you're moving closer to his property. There's about 47 feet of width between this picket fence and the hedge line now, and then it necks down to about 16 feet of improved width through Mr. Newstead's property. This is looking back towards the north, back towards Riverside, and the rights of way width are sort of off the picture, but you can see roughly from the picket fence, and then it's about 16 to 20 feet on the other side of these blackberries is that width of that right of way. Right-of-way vacations are addressed in the Oregon Revised Statutes, as Mr. Nolan was talking about. There's a portion of the Oregon Revised Statutes that allows the governing body to, under its own motion, seek vacation of a right-of-way. We are seeking the City of Gold Hill initiate the vacation proceedings as authorized in ORS 271130. And then we would like to be able to meet with the City Council to discuss further the vacation with seeking a positive recommendation from this body. We're seeking 68 feet of this 80-foot right-of-way, allowing for a 12-foot right-of-way to be preserved to allow for any public utilities or pedestrian access down to the river there. The stars on this this map represent the various property owners around and the neighborhood, and they signed off. So that was just the exam agreed to, or who had thought this wasn't a terrible idea and signed this petition in favor of it. So Mr. Newstead's available to speak directly this evening to any questions anyone has. We would like to thank you for your consideration and a recommendation in favor, or no recommendation at all, so that we can go speak to the City Council about this matter.
What's the depth of that 68-foot lot or whatever it is?
The dimension of it along the frontage?
Yeah.
Give me just a second. It is a 200-foot dimension.
So it's 68 by 200 feet?
Right.
I mean, that's the amount of that you want vacated?
Correct. That's the area, yes.
So that's 13,600 square feet, basically a quarter of an acre.
Yes.
Actually more than that. I guess, is that buildable?
It's 100% floodplain. It's all within the FEMA 100-year floodplain. I believe we talked about it last month, but I'd have to look at the maps. I'm not sure where the floodway is. The floodway is unbuildable, sort of no matter what. 100-year floodplains, I'm not sure how Gold Hill's rules are. I could speak to, just generic FEMA rules. I don't believe that that's Mr. Newstead's intentions to build on that, though. He would have to speak to it.
I would just like to chime in with the length that was just stated of the 200 feet. That include, I mean, 7,400 and 7,500 altogether are 200
Oh,
feet.
that's
there.
correct.
So that portion of lot 12 of 7,400 should be removed from there.
So looking at an adjacent property that's somewhat similar, I'm just looking at the assessor's maps, so I don't have a survey of it. Looking at an adjacent property that's similar, it's about 70 feet. So over on Estramondo, there's a similar partition, and so I would say roughly 130 feet by 68, 8,840 square feet.
I guess my point is that it's a lot bigger than a lot of the, the other, we have lots that are 5,500 square feet, it looks like, or, this is,
Steve,
it's a large,
Commissioner Kessling, can you get a little closer to your mic? We're having a hard time hearing you.
oh, sorry. It seems like it's potentially a large buildable lot. And if you switch the easement and just put a driveway easement along Mr. Newstead's property, gave him 12 feet or whatever it is, then the city would, if the city didn't want to have a park, or the neighbors didn't want to have a park, the city would own a very nice piece of, a buildable riverfront lot that's worth a lot of money. I don't see why we'd want to vacate that.
It's about 2/10 of an acre. I mean, roughly.
I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but I don't know that you couldn't build something there without disturbing the driveway access for.
It's true. We had a
Newstead
giant truck. We had a big truck that pulled down into the driveway easement, today, and they had a very hard time turning around right there. I mean, I went outside and they probably did a 15-point turn. Guys had to get out of the truck just to be able to make sure it backed up without hitting my vehicle on my portion of the property.
But still, there's plenty of,
it's a very awkward spot. If you go to the end of Estramato, where it dead ends into the river, they have it paved going all the way down with retaining walls. Not saying I'm interested in doing anything like that, having to do with retaining walls, but eventually it'd be nice to have a paved access.
But you could have a paved access just to your house without taking that whole piece. I mean, that's probably $100,000 worth of building lot at least.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to talk to an appraiser and work with the city to see what we're willing to come up with. I mean, I'm more than willing to talk to somebody about that who's a professional appraiser, real estate agent.
But I'm surprised. I mean, you've come this far. You've got to know what it's worth better than anybody else.
Oh, I've looked at comp properties in the area. Yeah, I definitely have. I just don't think that property is, and this is just me having experience in the past of building and also doing fire trail restoration, working for open space in a different state, and seeing that as more of a unusable part. I mean, I understand that the Parks Commission and the master plan has it as a possible overlook, which would take quite a lot of improvements to make that a safe overlook. For one, since the river is very steep, it's a darker section with lower elevation. We're like one of the lower elevation houses of Gold Hill down there, so it would need a lot of upkeep, is what I'm saying.
Well, there are two things. One of them is that the space was identified by the National Park Service as a potential park. So people who actually know parks said this would be a good one, and that was reiterated in the in some of our city visioning a few years ago. So as a park, it actually makes sense. I can understand in our current economic situation that people don't want parks because they attract the homeless or whatever it is. But
no, I want parks, and I think a lot of people are agreeable wanting parks, just being realistic about where the parks are set, honestly. I mean,
well, but part of the thing is that we have a lot of people who volunteer their time to create parks and maintain them. And the most appropriate person, given your own desire to create parks and maintain them, would be for you to maintain this for the community. I mean, that seems really straightforward. But if you don't want to do that, then the question is, what is the best use for the city? And the city parks department has no money. And this is a buildable lot. I'm pretty sure that if you were to, just put the easement, give you an easement so you have a clear driveway on your side that instead of on the other side, and the city would have a buildable lot that's riverfront and probably worth.
I mean, I don't know if it's a buildable lot. I think you're saying it possibly is. I'm saying I don't think it is. So, I mean, wouldn't that be wise to have the city take a look to see if that would be a buildable lot or not? Just dependent on the other neighbors who live. I live at 28. Other neighbors are at 43, 44. What is that? 89 or 98 right there, right kitty corner at Dardanelles and Riverside, right there. So I mean, people need access to their properties and homes, and so that may create an access issue for all those adjacent neighbors.
So
I'm just saying. I mean, I'm not the builder.
Yeah, but we have a couple of planners on this. Is this buildable? Anybody know?
The floodway line on the FEMA Map Service Center maps runs approximately 50% of the way through Mr. Newstead's current residence. So a large portion of this lot would be within the floodway, which is undevelopable.
Yeah, so Ryan?
And Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair Brown, if it's appropriate, I'll answer a couple of questions that have come up. So one question was about street width. So I think if we look at Dardanelles, what often happens in Gold Hill, I think, is that people look at what is the current pathway or roadway as opposed to what is the public right-of-way. So at the end of Dardanelles here, it may seem like a narrow pathway, but it's really an 80-foot wide section of public right-of-way, which is the widest section of public right-of-way in Gold Hill. So the standard street public right-of-way is 60 feet. Small local access streets are allowed to be 50 feet, and then alleys are 20 feet. So it is currently the widest section of public right-of-way that exists, which is designed for arterial streets. It's even wider than the public right-of-way for 2nd Avenue. So, and you're looking at it, if you look at Mr. Newstead's home, it appears in an aerial that it's somewhere between 5 and 7 feet is when it starts off of his home. There's a small structure that I'm not sure is still there, but it shows in some aerials that looks like it's kind of a little bit over the right-of-way line. And so then you would head 80 feet east, and that would be the end of the public right-of-way. So just to clarify what area you're talking about. And then you're talking about the size. So if you go from his property line down towards the river, that's 122.6 feet. And so that would be 122.6 feet by 68 feet, but the angle at the river is a little bit of an angle, so that's an approximate area. The floodway portion starts 57 feet down the edge of the property. So it's roughly half. In Gold Hill, you can develop in the floodway if you have an engineered no-rise analysis and meet floodproofing standards, including elevation and floodproof construction. So it's potentially developable. It's a large piece of property. So those are, I think, questions that might help you with or answers to some of the questions that have come up. If there's anything else I can try to assist.
Yeah, I have with with the width of the street. So let's just say the city wants to use it to develop on at some point in the future or create a park. We'd have to finish the development of the street. So we would have to finish make it 80 feet across. And maybe you could take a look at whatever you're looking at right now, Ryan, but doesn't that cut into that historical home that's up the hill from or north of Mr. Newstead's property? And then also takes over what the other property is using for a driveway?
It looks like it's 10
Look
feet
that way.
off of the property to the north of Mr. Newstead, and it goes further east than I think people realize.
Ryan, so I went out there with a measuring wheel after I got the maps of Gold Hill, knowing that Dardanelles is supposed to be 80 feet wide, or the right of way is. And then when I took the measuring wheel on Riverside, doing the width, Dardanelles and Riverside, from 44 to 43 Dardanelles widthways across Riverside, that was only 47 feet between their fence lines. From the white picket fence, and that matches up to, I believe it's 89 Dardanelles with their chain link fence just north of 44.
So if it's a mapping error, I would definitely suggest that the Planning Commission or City Council require the interested party to pay for a survey to determine what the actual right-of-way width is. According to the county survey, that's 80 feet. If it's in reality only 45 feet or something, that's a significant map error, which is not unheard of in an 1884 survey.
Right.
But it would help clarify a lot of questions if that area is actually only 45 feet and not 80 feet.
In the beginning, I thought it was 60 feet, but then even widening the 60 feet would go into the 44 Dardanelles historical home. It would just butt up against the front of her porchway.
My guess is that the 80-foot right of way is accurate, and typical of Gold Hill, people have encroached on it and have done that for a long time. That's what happens. And then at a certain point, you run into the Planning Commission, and they say, "Wait a second, this actually isn't yours." And then, and then what is the best of it? And then do we give up a $100,000 or $150,000 piece of property to somebody who wants it because they want it, or do we sell it?
I'm looking at an aerial image of the neighborhood, and I can measure, if I go north from 28 Dardanelles to First Avenue, there's a home on the left and a home on the right. Those homes are 105 feet apart. So that indicates to me that there is potentially 80 feet of right of way between those two homes. I think a survey would probably be a good idea before considering a recommendation. That would be a suggestion from me.
So the city has not done any city surveys since the initial maps were created?
Not for the historic core of town. It's a pretty well laid out town. There are some properties where buildings have been built over the property line, but to my knowledge, the street layout is correct.
Yeah, I would love for everybody to come down and walk and actually see it for themselves. I know Steven's saying that he had an issue with a young college student that I've been having do some landscaping in my yard, but I can't imagine that guy would be threatening or rude in any sort of way. He's timid as can be.
That
was
my experience, and I would.
But I'd love for you to come down. Honestly, I'd love to meet you, and we could walk through and just really check it out and look at all the dimensions of the lots.
Okay.
So if you do that, I would suggest you look at the street width at 2nd Avenue in Dardanelles, and the right of way goes from the back of the sidewalk to the back of the sidewalk, and that looks like it's approximately 80 feet at 2nd Avenue and Dardanelle Street.
Right, and I have looked at that as well, but
That continues down to the river.
So what is it that you, I mean, what is it that you want to do with this?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, Mr. Newstead, if you could talk about, it's hard for us to make a recommendation if we don't know what you're willing to offer or want to do, or, yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense as well. So, I mean, I want to keep on upgrading and enhancing the neighborhood with landscaping and property maintenance. If I don't keep that up, it's just going to end up overgrown and become a potential fire hazard eventually. I've had people drive down fast when we're playing with my daughter out there. And so we have other people who come over with their families, and we just want to make it a safer place. There's a blind spot. And we don't want the risk. And I know we could play other places or go to a local playground, but when we're going for walks from our home, it's just risky sometimes, and
that seems a little disingenuous. I mean, this is a dead end street into the river. How can somebody be speeding down it without?
No, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen from time to time. It does. We have people in the summertime coming down with their kayaks, wanting to find river access and just excited. So it's happened from time to time. I'm not saying that's an everyday occurrence by any means.
And if we were to give this to you and say we're going to preclude any sort of building on it, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, that would be fine with me. I would like to construct a gate in the front, and that's basically the extent of it.
And would you provide river access?
You mean the easement that we are proposing in our plan?
And would you maintain it?
The easement?
Yes.
The 12 or 16 foot easement that we were proposing?
Yeah, I'm just figuring out what, before we give you $100,000 or more worth of property, what are you willing to do for it? And what are you willing to do to protect the?
I know you keep throwing out numbers, but if we could get an appraiser to get in here and appraise the value of the property, I mean, we can negotiate on price to treat it like a property purchase from the city.
That might be an appropriate thing.
Well,
And again, Steve, say that again. What were you saying?
Well, I mean, it's the city needs money, and if we're going to let go of this, I can't imagine letting go of it for free. I mean, it's just.
I think that's fair. I mean, but we need to, what he's saying. I think Mr. Newstead said that let's get it. If we want to make a recommendation, then we can make a recommendation to council that we could add that, or we could not make a recommendation to council.
I think we should determine whether it is in fact buildable, because if it's a buildable lot, with just switching that easement, the easement from one side to the other, then it's a very different situation. Then it's
In what way? In what way? You mean because the city could build on it?
Yeah, because if the city has a buildable lot, then we get to raise, we get the extra sewer and water, we get the extra tax benefits, and the city makes a lot of money from a new house, which is in a prime location.
Well, I think that Ryan already cleared it up that it potentially could be if there was some engineering done. So I think we already know that it is buildable.
So then I think,
to clarify, my point was that about half of it is buildable without engineering, and the other half would be buildable with engineering.
So.
Right.
Yeah, so we're talking about a prime Gold Hill building lot.
I think that sounds like your next move then to.
So it sounds like we're coming up with some recommendations for council to consider. Is that what where you're going, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay.
I can see both sides of this. I mean, I I can see the side where the city hasn't done anything with this property forever. So are they ever going to do anything with it, regardless of which way this decision goes? And I can see Mr. Newstead's side of it too, is he could, the city's not going to give it away for free. And if the city's, I can see we might want to put a park there someday, but when is someday? And I don't know that someday would ever happen, in my own opinion, but so I'm on the fence either way, really.
Well, it's not our decision to make,
Well,
but
true,
our
but
decision to make some recommendations. So I
right.
think I could add that to the recommendation to consider, for council to consider. I also think that if we are going to use it, if it is going to be an 80-foot wide street that actually ends up happening, we have to consider the fact that if it gets fully developed, that there's, is that reasonable? Is that feasible? Does that make sense? Because it looks like it's cutting into historic properties where at least where their front yard fence is, even though they may have encroached. We don't know, because we're probably going to recommend a survey to council to be able to make those determinations. But the other thing I was thinking is that, if it's going to be sold to one residence, does that mean that the city should be opening it up for sale to whomever? That's the only question that I would have. But I do have to say that when I've been down on that property, it feels like, and I think that's probably what you felt, Commissioner Kiesling, that is his front yard. That seemed, that it seems like it's part of that property. And I understand it's not, it's part of but it could easily be a really nice piece of property with them giving them the opportunity to purchase that, which would give Gold Hill money. It's not being used, therefore it could be used. It also seems to attract people near and around, people's families that want to just hang out down there. So I don't know that a park actually would be reasonable for the community, or even if the community wants that, because that's something we'd have to check into first. And it doesn't sound like the residents that would be around that would want a park. So I don't even know if a park would be even allowable or acceptable for the residents that live here. But I do agree that if we're going to sell it, that the city should get something for it, because yeah.
Yeah, I don't imagine anybody wants to widen that street. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere but into the river. And if it's not going to be a park, then the question is, what's the highest value for the city? And
Right.
My guess is the highest value for the city is not somebody's front yard, but another house. That seems pretty straightforward, and it's a buildable lot. So, how do you make that happen? And
Well, that's what I was saying. We did decide that we were going to make a recommendation to council that they were to sell it, then it would be sold just like any other piece of real estate, right?
So I'm thinking the recommendation you should make is that the council should hear this if the applicant provides both a survey and an appraisal, and we find out if we're required to open that up to open bidding when we do sell it, if we do.
So what I'm hearing.
Notes that I took too, that we would make a recommendation. Sorry, were you saying something, Ryan?
No, this is James. I was saying something. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. So what I was just hearing, that you're open to the possible purchase of that property, but I would be responsible for survey. I would be responsible for this
Appraisal.
Thank you. And then it would possibly, after I paid for the survey and appraisal, it would possibly go up for open bidding.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very fair.
No, that doesn't sound very.
No,
Yeah,
I think that if the city wants to do that, the city should be willing to survey its own I mean, the commission, we can talk about that, whether or not we think that the city should be.
I disagree with that. I think that it should be up to the applicant, because right now the city is not interested in selling that property. But if someone were to tell us what it was worth, then maybe we would consider it. I don't think the city should pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. The city, you know, I would just let sleeping dogs lie at this point. But, you know, if you really want to push this, you know, get an appraisal and a,
Yeah.
I'm fine giving the appraisal. I'm definitely.
Well,
fine
listen,
giving the
I just want to make sure that we're fair too. But I don't think that anybody's pushing
Yeah.
anything. I think the applicant is an applicant, and we need to treat the applicant, you know, with respect. And it's just an applicant asking for something from the commission, and it's our job to give council recommendation.
Perhaps before Mr. Newstead spends the money on the appraisal and the survey, we could find out first if it was going to have to be open bidding, because
Absolutely.
he may not want to
Yeah,
open
I
that
mean,
can of worms if that's the way we have to proceed.
maybe Ryan, could you spend a little bit of time figuring out, you know, a scenario where this is buildable on as you know, draw out for
Yeah,
access.
I think I could do that. I think it's clearly buildable. I think the general practice when you're vacating right-of-way in Oregon is that it would go equally to neighboring property owners. I think the city would have to see if it's legal to, because this is larger than most property vacation, right-of-way vacations, if this creates a new legal parcel, that might be a question for the attorney to answer, because it appears like if you vacated it, that's large enough to be a city lot. Could you just sell an individual city lot? And if you did that, you are required when you dispose of surplus property over, I think it's $5,000 to go out to public bid. So I think there are some questions that need to be clarified before you really
I was
move
wondering.
forward on sale.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do the existing thing anyway. I mean, we could, if we vacated it, it would not be legal to vacate it to the one person like that.
And my understanding is the city could choose to vacate half of Dardanelles along Mr. Newstead's frontage, and that could go to him, but the other half should legally go to Michael Duro, the neighbor on the other side of the street.
That was my question too. Like if we're going to vacate
That's
it.
typically the process, is that the neighboring properties that front the right-of-way have the potential to purchase or to acquire the right-of-way.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
But this is a little different in that you actually would, this is from the original town plat, which is not common, and this would be creating a parcel that itself is large enough to be buildable. So I think if the planning commission wants to make a recommendation, or if the city council wants to entertain further discussion, at some point there should probably be an attorney opinion on, do you have to follow the strict ORS right-of-way vacation guidelines, or can you create a new parcel and sell that independently?
Well, if I was James, I wouldn't, if I was in his position, I wouldn't want to put myself in the spot where somebody could purchase this piece of property out from under me when it was my intent to purchase this property, and it could potentially landlock him. Maybe not even with access to his own driveway. I don't know.
So the city can't take an action that would create a landlocked parcel. So design, if it were a separate lot, would at least have to give him 20 feet of frontage on at least a 20-foot alley. But yeah, I see Mr. Warwick has a good point.
Yeah. This is a tough one.
And I'm sorry I got so animated about this, but I actually worked on that pocket park with the National Park Service people. So this is
Yeah.
local.
It seems to me there's kind of two questions. The first big question is this at all a good idea for the city to consider vacating and disposing of that property? And then if it is, there's a lot of questions about what the correct process would be.
So would we potentially direct the council to answer those two questions?
I think that's it, but I think that the commission, since we've had a lot of discussion, I think that, and I don't know if this is correct, since we're making a recommendation, I don't know if I have to wait for somebody to make a motion. But the notes that I took is, a survey needs to be done to clarify, where the right of way is, where the property lines are. Is it a buildable lot? Would the city sell the property? And if so, we need to understand how much that property would be, what we would sell that to Mr. Newstead for. And do we have to legally open that up for bid to other residents? And if we are going to give access to Mr. Newstead, does that also mean we have to split that and give that access, give the rest of the other half of that property to the owner next door? What are some of the other ones here? The other option is, give it to Mr. Newstead and possibly the other property owner and preclude building on it. Potentially maintain an easement or something so public has access down to the middle maybe of those two pieces if we have to split it up, or if that's not legally required, maybe not. So those are all the things that and then also getting an attorney's opinion on those issues. And then the other part of that, which I think kind of is included in those discussions, is does this create a new city lot? That's the attorney question. And what does that mean legally for the city of Gold Hill? So that's all the notes that I took. And I don't know, because we haven't done a recommendation to council before, but I think that it makes sense that we, make a recommendation to council, that we've had some thoughts in some areas about this, and that we, I don't know that we have to say it's a good idea or not a good idea. I think that we need to just say that there's options there and questions that we're not aware of, and that here's some of the items that came up in our discussions, and we're not capable, and nor are we in a situation where we're making those decisions. And we make those recommendations to council to look at all those bullet points. And
I think what we'd be doing is asking council to do some fact finding.
Yeah,
I guess for us.
Yeah, we're just going to make a recommendation that I don't know that we're going to be making a recommendation that has to go one way or the other, because we legally don't know which way it should go. I think that I think the recommendation is, hey, this could be a good idea. As you mentioned, Mark, I guess that's the one thing I didn't bring up, is that it's it's a piece of parcel that hasn't been used. That the homeowners have been maintaining. It's a beautiful piece of property because it has been maintained by the owner.
Right.
So if we're thinking about using it for something other than a dead end street, and it's going to be a park, will that ever happen? And is that really fair for us to expect that a homeowner is going to be taking care of public property that we're not willing to give them an opportunity to purchase? So there's, I think, a lot of the questions that we still have, and that I think that we could meet. I'm going to recommend that we put that in writing and maybe have Ryan. I'm not sure how this works on a recommendation, but I would imagine the commissioners are going to want to see that in writing before they send it to the city council.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. It seemed like Chair Brown had a pretty good grasp. My suggestion would be that you kind of nominate one of you to write it. I could do it if that's helpful, or Jessica.
I wrote all those down. I can type it up to you and send it over to you, Ryan, and then you can wordsmith it or see if I missed anything, and then we could send it out to the commissioners.
If that's agreeable to the commission, I think that's a good idea. And I would suggest reconvening at the next planning commission to vote to approve the recommendation that you ultimately send to the city council.
Okay. Does anybody have, is that all right with the other commissioners that we put those bullets together and that we reconvene at the next planning commission and
Sure. Yeah,
make recommendations?
yeah.
Commissioner Kiesling,
Yeah, that's fine.
your thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good, I mean, I think that's the best we can do.
All right, Mr. Newstead, sorry we don't have like anything more concrete. I guess that's our role right now is just to bring up some ideas and thoughts and concerns or whatever to the council, and we'll reconvene at the next planning commission with that list, and then we can get a list to him too, right? We can get a list to Mr. Newstead. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to say? Mr. Newstead, anything else you want to say?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I was saying, no, I just really appreciate your time, you know, and all the thoughtfulness that's going into this from all parties involved. So I'm glad we're moving forward and making progress in the decision making. So thank you very much.
Great.
Just
Okay.
have to bear with the process, I guess.
I wouldn't expect it any other way. But if any of you ever want to come down, you could get my number and contact info, and I'd be happy to just meet each one of you and come down and take a look at everything.
So it doesn't seem like we have any further discussion on that. So I don't know. I think we're concluded unless there's something else that needs to happen.
I'm going to sign off. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, James.
Thanks.
I don't currently have anything else coming up, but I'll let you guys know as soon as I do, and we'll have.
Okay.
Jessica, I did have, Gus Wolf sent me some stuff on a lot up on 7th. I'm going to email you some information. I guess you and Ryan had already addressed something with regards to this lot. I'll get that emailed to you tonight so you can take a look at it. A concerned citizen.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Okay, we're
All righty.
adjourned.
Thanks.
Bye. Oh, Ryan, really quick.
Yes.
Can I get your email address?